thank you again for joining us on Searching for Answers. If you'll get your Bibles and turn to the book of John and go to chapter 12, verse 20, and read along with us as we go book by book, or verse by verse, or sometimes word by word, and help to explain what we're reading and what Jesus was all about, what his mission was in the book of John. My name is Carolyn Thompson, and on my right,
John Jones, the School of Religion at La Sierra University.
John Brunt, the Azure Hills Church.
Ivan Blazin, School of Religion at Loma Linda University.
John Brunt, I'm going to ask you to start reading a little review for us for chapter 12. You can start with verse 20 or wherever you like.
Let me start with verse 20,
Okay.
which is a very significant incident in the life of Jesus, especially when we remember some of the things we've seen before.
Yes.
We have seen several times where Jesus says, "My hour has not yet come."
Yes, I remember
My
that.
hour has not yet come. Well, now we come to the place where his hour comes.
Now it comes.
And so this is a very significant turning point in John. This is John chapter 12, beginning with verse 20. Among those who went up to worship at the festival were some Greeks. They came to Philip, who was from Bethsaida in Galilee, and said to him, "Sir, we would like to see Jesus." So Philip went and told Andrew, and the two of them went to tell Jesus. Then Jesus replied, "The hour has come for the Son of Man to be glorified. In truth, in very truth, I tell you, a grain of wheat remains a solitary grain unless it falls into the ground and dies. But if it dies, it bears a rich harvest."
Excuse me. Was he referring to himself there?
Sure, I think
If
so.
I die, go ahead, continue.
Right. The man who loves himself is lost, but he who hates himself in this world will be kept safe for eternal life. If anyone serves me, he must follow me. Where I am, my servant will be. Whoever serves me will be honored by my Father. Now my soul is in turmoil, and what am I to say? "Father, save me from this hour"? No, it was for this that I came to this hour. Father, glorify your name. A voice sounded from heaven. I have glorified it, and I will glorify it again. The crowd standing by said it was thunder, while others said, an angel has spoken to him. Jesus replied, the voice spoke for your sake, not mine. Now is the hour of judgment for this world. Now shall the prince of this world be driven out, and I shall draw all people to myself when I am lifted up from the earth.
Okay, let's stop.
This, he said, to indicate the kind of death he was to die.
Yes. He knew, and he had his Father's blessing, and a voice came from heaven saying that he had glorified his work. And he tells the onlooking, the little group that's standing there or sitting, wherever they were, that they thought it was thunder or that somebody was talking to him. And he said, no, that was my Father. And he said that not for my sake, but for your sake, so you would understand what's going to happen to me in the next few days. Because we're counting now, we're minus how many? About before Jesus is going to be crucified? Was it in a week? 6 days?
It's getting down there.
It's getting down there. That's right.
Because in chapter 13 you'll have the evening before.
Yes.
That's 13, and here we
That's
are
right.
in 12.
Yeah.
Okay, John Jones, would you carry on verse what?
Maybe we
say
should
a couple
say
things?
a couple things about
Okay.
what we just read.
Well, I would like to say this, and that is, it seems in a way strange, isn't it? That Jesus says, the hour is coming for the Son of Man to be glorified. And here he's going to go to the cross,
Yes.
to a crucifixion, to a terrible death, but it's his hour of glory.
Yeah.
And he says, as you know, if the Son of Man be lifted up, you can see the cross coming up. But not only that, he's going to be lifted up before the people who will come to him as a result of that cross. Now, they want to kill Jesus in this very chapter.
Yes.
They want to put an end to him. They want to put an end to Lazarus. But according to Jesus, if I'm lifted up, far from that being the end of me, I will draw all people to myself.
Don't you think John plays on the double meaning of that word purposefully? Because lifted up could be a technical term for crucifixion, but it could also mean exaltation. And what he tries to show us is, for Jesus, they're one and the same. The cross is his glorification.
The other thing he says, but if I, even I, be lifted up, I will draw all men, mine says. And it should say just all to me. And I noticed both of your translations did that, because I see it isn't all men, it's everyone.
Yeah, everyone.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's
right. It's also interesting that here in John, Jesus is so resolute.
Yes.
You know, in Gethsemane, in the Synoptic Gospels, we have Jesus, let this cup pass from me if it's possible.
Yeah.
But here he says, what shall I say? Shall I say that let this, let me escape this? Shall I say...
Verse 27.
And he says, a resolute no.
Yeah.
This is exactly why I've come. This is my mission. This is why I'm here. So all the way through.
Well, a few verses back, it says, my heart is troubled.
He does say,
right
I'm
there.
in turmoil.
Same verse.
But then he says, what shall I say? Father, save me from this hour? No.
It's not. That tells us that he's not offhand about this. He's not dismissive about it. Inwardly, he's churning, But nonetheless, that resoluteness overwhelms the qualms. I think that is important. The juxtaposition in verse 27 is of those two notions, right, side by side, is very telling, isn't it?
Yes.
But wouldn't you say, though, John, that the Gospel of John, Jesus, we get a different flavor, we get a different picture, because in the other, this is a tragic event, that he's going to go to the cross. But in this gospel, you have a take-charge Jesus. He's not one who's going to be manipulated by the people, but he's one who's forging ahead with what he knows is his fate.
Yes.
And that's how he will draw people to himself. So there's something going on
Yeah,
there,
that's
the
right.
theology of John.
Well, John does have his own theology, and it is reflected that way. Now, some people, like certain scholars, those of you who dip into the scholarship, Joachim Jeremias and Ernst Käsemann, have called this a docetic Jesus. That is to say, one who looks like he's here in the world, but really is superhuman. Indeed, one scholar in German has said that in this gospel, Jesus appears schreitende über die Erde, striding over the earth. You kind of have a picture of him with his feet 18 inches off the ground, or something like that. But the fact of the matter is that while that resolution is strong, this is in some way the most touching, moving, human Jesus. We see already in chapter 4, he's worn out, he's hot and tired at that wellhead there by the village in Syrophoenicia. And so here Jesus really comes through in ways that grab us.
Well, how about at the tomb of Lazarus? Now, he knows he's going to raise Lazarus.
Right.
And yet, when he comes to the tomb, what does he do?
He weeps.
Jesus wept.
Yes.
H.M.S. Richards used to say that's the shortest verse in the Bible. Jesus wept. And so we have a Jesus who knows what's going to be, but we have a Jesus who is totally human.
Totally human.
Another interesting little note here, and John, I appreciated you. It's a New English, isn't it?
Yes.
I like that translation. Let me encourage our viewers to add the New English to their collection of Bibles on their shelf. It's pretty good. It's pretty well done, isn't it?
Now, is that what you have there?
Mine happens to be too.
Okay.
Fact is that John, once again, puts in one of his little parentheses here in verse 33, when he is praying. John whispers off the side to us, he said this to show what kind of death he was going to die. But again, here is Jesus praying to God, but with an eye toward those who were standing around him. And that happened at the tomb of Lazarus as well, didn't it? We see him back in chapter 11, in verses 41 and 42. Father, I thank you, you heard me. I know, Lord, you always hear me. Father, you always hear me. But I said this for the sake of the people standing around, you know? And then here again,
Same thing.
Yeah, to show to the people around him how he was going to die. So Jesus speaks to the Father in ways that have the around him in mind. John uses that to speak to his readers, as if Jesus had us as readers in mind as well, you see.
And this is very interesting, what happens here at the cross, because he says...
Which verse are you in now?
Well, I'm in verse 31. And it says, Jesus says, now is the judgment of this world. When he dies on the cross, we might think of it as the judgment of the Romans upon him, perhaps the Jews, the leaders who handed him over to the Romans, and so on. But he says, as a matter of fact, the deepest thing I can say about this is the moment when this world will be judged and when Satan himself will be defeated. It's at the cross. Doesn't look like it, right? To all outward appearance, it doesn't look like that. But in some of the deepest and darkest moments of life come some of the greatest moments of life, the glory. And that was the case with Jesus, right?
I have one other question here. What is the significance of the fact that his hour comes now when Greeks come?
Well, Greeks
for him.
could be a group other than Christians, I read. That when they spoke of the Greeks, it could be the Greek
Well,
people.
they're Gentiles.
But they could be Gentiles, right?
That's what they are.
Oh.
So this mission is not just to Jews. This is
Everybody.
a larger mission
That's
for
right.
sure that Jesus has.
You know, this really is the turning point between the two halves of John's Gospel, isn't it? Book of Signs is now completed. We've had 7 great miraculous demonstrations of the divine plan for Jesus and all of us in this world. Now, no more miracles. We do have that miraculous catch of fish in the appendix in the last chapter, but that's something apparently added on by his followers. 7 signs among the many that Mark references, carefully selected, polished, put in place. No more miracles now. Now it's time for Jesus to go to glory, but it's an odd upside-down glory in a way, isn't it? And ultimately, it teaches us all the lesson that God's kingdom is an upside-down kingdom where the first are last and the last first, and all of this world's conventional wisdom is simply reversed somehow.
Yeah. Now, at the end of the gospel, about talking about signs, it says, now Jesus did many other signs that are not written in this book, but these signs are written so that you might believe that this is the Christ, this is the Messiah, the Son of the living God. And so, really, the question of who Jesus is what we have to inquire about here. Who is this man, you see? He's showing the way. He doesn't do miracles just so people can say,
important.
wow. He does miracles so he can reveal who he is and what his intentions are. And in fact, in the Gospel of John, what God's mind is, the Father's mind. Sometimes people make a disjunction between the Father and the Son. But back of everything that Jesus does in the Gospel of John stands the Father. He comes to do the will of the Father, to reveal the word of the Father. He is the revelation of the Father. As we'll see pretty soon.
I think we should stress something in verse 30, I believe it is. Jesus said, this is still chapter 12 in the book of John, verse 30, Jesus said, this voice was for your benefit, not mine. Now is the time for judgment on this world. Now the prince of this world, Satan, will be driven out. But I, when I am lifted up from the earth, will draw all to myself. He said this to show the kind of death he was going to die. But I think people have a tendency to skip over that verse about now the prince of this world will be driven out because Jesus won the battle. So we can all be grateful for that. Now we all have a chance. Okay?
Well, but you see, some people will say, well, you know, I really love reading this. But when I look at my experience and the experience of many others, and the slaughters in the world, the violence, and so on, in what way has the prince of this world been cast out? And so we need to answer that question. He seems
hasn't
to be
been
operating.
cast out, but he now cannot inherit the earth. But he goes out with a vengeance to do everything he can to make everybody sin.
Well, I think the death knell for him has been sounded.
Yeah,
He's not dead, but
yeah,
the death knell
that's
has been
right.
sounded.
Yeah.
So in that sense, perhaps that's how
Okay.
He's been
cast out.
diagnosed as terminal at this point.
He's terminal. Very good.
That's good, John.
Shall I continue on?
Sure.
Verse 34, chapter 12, in the book of John. The crowd spoke up. We have heard from the law that the Christ will remain forever. So how can you say the Son of Man must be lifted up? Who is this Son of Man? When Jesus told them, you are going to have the light just a little while longer. Walk while you have the light before darkness overtakes you. The man who walks in the dark does not know where he is going. Put your trust in the light while you have it, so that you may become sons of light. When he had finished speaking, Jesus left and hid himself from them. Now, why would he choose at that moment to hide himself from them?
Well, it's interesting. He's the light,
Yeah,
and he's hiding himself from them.
yeah.
But that's an interesting question, all right. But, you know, when he says here, you know, notice you'll have the light only a little while longer. Seems to me that Jesus is asking for a decision. You need to decide and decide now. Crucial things have taken place, but I'm not going to be with you, so make a decision for me.
John Jones, did you want to add something to that?
Well, you know, I think the decisiveness of Jesus' appeal comes through in all the Gospels, but maybe most clearly in John. He calls for, it's almost confrontational in a way, isn't it? And the day and the night business contributes to that. We've seen it before already. In chapter 9, the thing about seeing and being blind was paralleled there by day and night. 9, just quickly referencing back in verse 3. It's not that this man was born blind or his parents, but that God's power might be displayed. While daylight lasts, we carry on the work of him who sent me. Night comes when no one can work. While I'm in this world, I am the light of the world. And again in 11, Jesus is urging the disciples to go to Lazarus. And again, he says, you know, it's still day. Night is coming, but now is the time for us to go. So this theme of duality, this light-dark, day-night business, which is such a motif through John's Gospel, comes out once more here, right on the threshold of Calvary. Because here is where darkness really gathers. The clouds are gathering, and it looks hopeless.
And yet it's the hour
And
when
yet
he
it's
will
the-
be
exactly, so-
when he will be glorified.
Indeed.
There's a darkness, but there's a light.
That's right, and I think it's helpful for us to ask ourselves how that would work. In a church under persecution where people are being martyred, there's always the tendency to say, God will work a miracle as Jesus worked miracles. God will step in and deliver me. But when Jesus came right up against it, when it was the time, there was no miracle. And I think this has a message to persecuted martyrs in the early church to say, this time, no miracle. But the hidden glory still turns out to be glorious after all.
Yeah.
Well,
and
what
if-
about after, at the end times when we're going to be persecuted and so forth?
Same thing.
Why do we have angels that are around us to deliver us? Why aren't we killed?
We have to wait and see how that works out. The fact is that Shadrach, Meshach, Abednego said, we're not sure whether we'll be delivered or not, but we'll refuse to bow down to the king's image, whether we are saved in this world or not. And I think the ultimate Christian testimony is a willingness to live or not live as God decrees.
That's true. I go along with that. But one thing from what I have studied in the last few days was that after a time when probation closes and Satan, Jesus withdraws his protection and his glory and so forth, and he lets Satan have full strength of doing what he wants to do to hurt us, it wouldn't do any good to kill us because probation is closed. So if we are killed, what does that do? That doesn't help anybody to be saved.
Well,
But
maybe
the
the power of evil is just destructive.
The onlooking universe, of course, will see what happens when Satan is given full sway to do what he wants. And I think what's going to happen isn't just for this world, but for the onlooking universe. And I think sometimes we forget that. We forget that there's going to be many people. Remember, Satan was still going around visiting different people in the different worlds in the cosmos. And he would set up his view of why he was right and Jesus was wrong. And from what I've read is that the people in other worlds didn't fully understand why Satan was being cast out until they saw him crucify Christ on the cross. And then they knew. And I know you all know that, but I thought maybe
That's important.
some of our listeners might like to hear that. Okay. Okay. John Brunt, would you continue on, please?
Sure. Verse 34. No, pardon me, verse 37.
Right.
Verse 37. In spite of the many signs which Jesus had performed in their presence, they would not believe in him, for the prophet Isaiah's utterance had come to be fulfilled. Lord, who has believed what we reported, and to whom has the Lord's power been revealed? So it was that they could not believe, for there is another saying of Isaiah's, He has blinded their eyes and dulled their minds, lest they should see with their eyes and perceive with their minds, and turn to me to heal them. Isaiah said this because he saw his glory and spoke about him. Maybe two more verses. For all that, even among those in authority, a number believed on him, but would not acknowledge him on account of the Pharisees, for fear of being banned from the synagogue. For they valued their reputation with men rather than the honor which comes from God.
Can you believe that? Some of them actually believed on what Jesus was saying. They believed on him, but they didn't want to be excommunicated.
And don't you think John says it in this way
Yeah.
to
Precisely.
speak to the people of his day who probably are facing this very question about whether they are going to remain in their position in the synagogue or whether they're going to make a clean sweep.
And they would lose their position, and then the Romans would come and close them down. Why, it'd be terrible.
As far as we know, synagogues took this action after Jesus' earthly ministry, later on. But John is kind of collapsing the time here when
Without
he
a doubt.
puts it this way.
Well, there is don't we have a little bit of a question here? Because there are some who did not believe, some who believed, but the ones who didn't believe, verse 39, and so they could not believe, because Isaiah said, he has blinded their eyes, he's hardened their heart, so that they might not look with their eyes and understand with their heart and turn, and I would heal them. Now that sounds like, God himself is making it impossible for some of these people to believe. Of course, when you go back to the Old Testament, you see this recalcitrant people, and because they had opportunity in Isaiah's time and did not avail themselves of it, then they are hardened as a result. So this is really, in a way, consequence. What looks like cause, I think would be better spoken of as consequence.
And don't you think we understand that better when we remember what was in John 9?
Yeah.
Where at the end of that chapter, Jesus has been shining as the light of the world, and for the blind man, that
yes.
light opens the
Yes.
eyes. But for those who oppose, the religious leaders, the very same light that opens the blind man's eyes closes theirs.
That's right. It's all in their attitude toward him.
I'm going to read a couple of verses here. We're just about out of time. Verse 44 in chapter 12. Then Jesus cried out, "When a man believes in me, he does not believe in me only, but in the one who sent me. When he looks at me, he sees the one who sent me. I have come into the world as a light, so that no one who believes in me should stay in darkness. As for the person who hears my words but does not keep them, I do not judge him, for I did not come to judge the world, but to save it." Famous verse. "There is a judge for the one who rejects me, does not accept my words. That very word which I spoke will condemn him at the last day. For I did not speak of my own accord, but the Father who sent me commanded me what to say and how to say it. I know that his command leads to eternal life. So whatever I say is just what the Father has told me to say." So there again, Jesus says, I did not come into the world to judge the world, but hopefully that he might save the world, right? And now, as you can see, our time is almost over. So until next time, this is Carolyn Thompson and all my friends saying, see you again.